Okay, hello, gentlemen and ladies, of course. Let's talk today about week 9. It is important that we understand what we have accomplished until now with conditional statements, for and while loops. I intend in this video tutorial to review and talk about and do a couple of exercises that have to do with loops, okay? Also, we are going to work with some logical operators which we will need in our conditional statements, okay? We're going to use the and, we're going to use the or in case that we need to add them to our conditional statements every time. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at how week 9 works, okay? And week 9, the first thing is logical operators. If you look at 9.1 focus on, talks about logical operators. In this case, we let's create us a really small program where we create, let's say, a string, okay, and we're going to call it hello world, and we're going to start playing with this string with some conditions, okay? Okay, so let's say this program is going to ask to find if the word starts with a vowel or a consonant, okay? In case we find a consonant, it's going to say, we're going to come out, the output is going to be consonant or vowel in each case. So we have hello world. So we need to grab that string and ask. It's easier to ask for vowels, of course, because there are only 5 instead of asking for consonants. So if, okay, and we need to find out what is the very first letter, okay? Okay, so if a dot character at, right? If the character at position 0, okay, since we are, this is going to return a character. Remember that a character, we can compare it using equals equals, different from a substring, which we will need the equals method, okay? So if the character at position 0 is equal to A, okay, and we use simple quotation marks because we're talking about characters. When we want to compare strings, then we use quotations. Now we're going to use the logical indicator OR, okay? It's marked with a double bar, okay? So we have another condition. If the character at position 0 is equal to A, or if the character at position 0 is equal to E, okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if our character is one of these letters, then we are going to say that it's a vowel. So this is how you can add an OR condition. If it's A, or if it's E, or if it's I, if it's O, or if it's U, we can add those conditions, okay? So we're going to say system.out, and we're going to say vowel, okay? Now everything else that happens, any other letter that is different from these 5, we're going to say it's a consonant. So in that case, we're just going to type in else system.out.println consonant. Something very important about the else is that if you only use one line of code in your else, if it's only going to do one thing, then you don't use the brackets, okay? If you need more than one line of code, you want to use brackets for the else, okay? So this is something, it's not going to affect the code, but for readability, in my personal opinion, I always use brackets so I know that this portion of code belongs to the else, okay? So this is the first example on how to use logical connectors or operators in our conditional statements, okay? Okay, so let's run our code and see what happens to the hello world. In this case, it shows a consonant because H is different from any of these vowels. Let's put in O just to check that it will show a vowel, okay? So as easy as that, we determine that the letter starts with a vowel or it starts with a consonant using the OR as the logical operator. Okay, so just as a review of methods, let's try to put this into methods. I'm going to organize all my examples into different methods, and that way we can just organize our code a little bit, okay? So I'm going to create a method down here. I'm going to call it public static void, okay, and I'm going to call it example1, okay, and remember that I can create stub methods just to place my code, and I'm going to put all my code, all the code that I was using for this example, and I'm just going to put it inside example1, okay, and that way I can minimize my code. And then I can make calls. Okay, I'm missing a bracket here. So I can make calls to each of the methods, and just in case I want to see them. Okay, so I have example 1, I have example 2, I have example 3. Because we're going to do some others where we involve loops and other conditional statements, okay? We're going to do 5 examples today. This might help us. Okay, now you can see that these examples we have a syntax error because we haven't declared these methods yet, okay? So let's just build them. Okay, so we have the first one. Okay, let's create another one. Okay, and then one more. Okay, we'll see later on how we can just add parameters if we need to remember this. Okay? Okay, in example number 2, we are going to work with numbers. In this case, our condition has to change. The condition is that when, let's write it down, if the number is greater than 10, and also a multiple of 2, then it will output correct. Okay? Otherwise, it will output invalid. Okay? So here, we're going to type in, we're going to create a scanner object. Okay, and since we're creating a scanner object, and this is also a review, let's try to make this, let's import it. Import our util. Okay, I'm going to import this so we can have our scanner reader here. Okay, and we're going to ask the user to input a number, okay? Or input any number, okay? Then, what we will do is grab that number and start making our conditional statements, okay? So make a variable a. Let's use the reader to input as an integer number the scanner, okay? Very well. And then after this, we're going to create our conditions. So we're going to say if a is greater than 10, and in Java and in this programming language, in order to compare or use a logical operator and, we have to use two ampersands, okay? We have to use two symbols, okay? So we say if a is greater than 10 and a is divisible by 2, then we're going to type in correct, okay? And here we need to make sure that a divisible by 2 is equal to 0. Okay, remember that a remainder 2 equal to 0 means that is divisible, okay? So here we have two conditions. If it's greater than 10 and a is divisible by 2. Otherwise, then we're going to say that it is invalid. Okay? So in this case, I am going to comment out example 1, 3, and 4, so I can only see example number 2 in our case, which is the one that we're working on. Here I have a small mistake. The package always have to come in first if we want to make this work. Or you can just take the package away and just put it in the source folder, okay? So let's see if this works. So we're going to run example number 2. It says input an integer number. In my case, I'm going to put 30. And it says correct. Okay? If I run it again, and I say 13, then it's invalid. Because it is greater than 10, but it is not divisible by 2. And let's say if I put the number 4, which is divisible by 2, but it's less than 10, it is also invalid. So as you can see, in order for a condition with AND to work, all the conditions have to be met in order for this to be true. And you can put as many conditions as you like, just using the logical connector AND, okay? Okay, now let's continue with another topic which we need to become experts in, and it's loops, okay? Remember, we have for loops and while loops. When and how to use them, it's your choice. You can pretty much do everything with a for loop and do everything with a while loop. The thing is that sometimes if you wish to create an infinite loop, you need to define it as a while loop. The only way that an infinite loop can happen is through a while loop. Well, there are some cases where the for loop will continue forever, but the way that you state a for loop and a while loop is a little different, okay? So let's start with our first example on how to use for loops, okay? In this program, we are going to add all the numbers from 1 to 100, okay? So if we need to add all the numbers from 1 to 100, we want to make a loop, which will iterate with all the numbers, okay? Now remember that in order to use a for loop, you need a start point, an end point, and the increase parameter, okay? So we're going to type in for int I, which I is a variable that can be any variable. I'm just creating a variable that I'm going to iterate from int I equals 0 to I less than 100. Now this is very important. If I start in 0 and I go all the way to less than 100, is from 0 to 99. That would be 100 iterations, okay? I can also say that start in 1 and I less or equal than 100, and it will also be 100 iterations, because in this case I include the 100 there, okay? And then I can iterate by 1. This means that every time that you run the loop, or the loop is finished, I will increase by 1. This is also very different depending on what you need. Sometimes you're going to need to decrease, okay? Sometimes you're going to need to increase by 2, by 4, or by whatever computation in your for loops, okay? So this is all these may change, okay? This depends on the problem that we need to tackle. Okay. So I have 100 iterations, and I, which is very important, I starts at 1. And I need to add all the numbers from 1 to 100. So I need to create a sum, but in order to create a sum, I cannot declare the variable inside the for, because every time that the for starts again, it will create the variable and rewrite what it was before. So I'm going to create the variable sum outside of the for loop, okay, before the for loop, and then I can start playing with the sum and overwrite the sum or update the sum every time the loop iterates. So the loop will run one time and do it 100 times. So then the sum is going to be equal to whatever the sum was on the previous iteration plus I. And let's see if this works. Let's make a logic test, okay? I is equal to 1. Sum is equal to 0 on iteration 1. So 0 is equal to 0 plus 1 and take it to sum. So now sum is equal to 1. Then on our second iteration, I will be equal to 2 because it already increased. So 1, which is the previous sum, plus 2 is equal to 3, and this will update sum, okay? Then continue. I will be equal to 3, so it would be 3 plus 3 equal to 6, okay? So it will start adding until I get to the number 100, okay? So let's see if this works. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to comment example number 2 and activate example number 3. And one more thing is missing. I need to, at the end of all the 100 iterations, I need to print out the sum. Okay, so it's going to iterate, and when it finishes, when this loop finishes, it's going to come out and it's going to show me the sum. Okay, so in this case, I get 5050, which is correct. That is the sum of the numbers between 1 and 100. Now I can also see how the sum iterates. So you can, if you want to print out each iteration, you can do it inside the for. So it's going to start 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 6, and so on and so forth every time that the sum completes. Okay, so you can print out each iteration, or you can print out the sum at the end. If we run the program this way, we're going to see that we get all the numbers every time that the sum was reading. So it's 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, and it goes all the way 100 times for the iteration. Okay. Sometimes I also like to use the iteration. So let's see, iteration. Okay, plus, and I want to see the iteration. Okay, iteration I, and then sum is equal to sum, just so I can see what is the iteration, and then I is the number or the iteration that I'm working on. That way we can understand how iterations work. So we can put it over here, and we can see that iteration 1, here I have a iteration 1 is sum 1. Sometimes you want to do this just so you understand what the program is doing. So in iteration 1, the sum is 1, in iteration 2, and you can go all the way to see where I gets. So in my case, I really gets to 100, okay? And the sum is the last one. Okay, so in example number 4, we are going to use a while loop instead of using a for loop. While loops have different characteristics. They use a parameter, and while that parameter is true, then it's going to continue looping until it changes. So the variable or that parameter will change or needs to change inside the while loop. Let me explain. In this example, we are going to manipulate a string and change all the letters A for an at, okay? For the Aruba symbol, okay? Okay, so the first thing we need to do is ask for a string. But in our case, let's just make a string word, and let's type in elephants. Okay? So in this case, the word, it should change the letter A, okay, for the symbol that we want. Very well. In this case, we want to make a while, okay? So we're going to say that while, okay, as a variable, okay, a variable that we need to create and increase, it's less than the amount of letters of the word, then continue doing it. Because what we're going to do is that we're going to analyze each position of this word, okay? And then if it meets our criteria, then we are going to change it, okay? Okay, so we need to create an integer variable called position, okay? And it's going to start in 0. So I'm going to start the position in 0, which is going to be the very first position of the word. So I'm going to say that while position is less than word dot length, then he's going to continue working on the loop. So look at the condition. While the position is less than the word dot length. In this case, we have a length of 9. Okay, so it goes from position 0 all the way to 8. While this condition is true, then I need to continue. The thing about while loops is that I need to change or increase the position inside towards the end or the beginning of the loop, okay? Okay, so the very first condition we need to make is where it says word or the character at position 0. If it's an A, what is it going to be? The question is that while position is always less than word dot length, or the maximum number of characters in the word, he's going to continue doing the loop, okay? So, if the character is actually A, then I need to break the word into 3 parts. First, what is the substring before that position? Then add the symbol, and finally add what is after that position, okay? So let's try to put and rename the word, like we just need to overwrite word. So word is going to be word dot substring from 0 to the position, okay? So that's the first thing we need to do. Then I need to add the symbol at, okay? And finally, I need the rest of the word, okay? So word dot substring from the position plus 1, because it's the position later on, all the way to word dot length, which is the very end of the word, okay? So what I'm doing is that I'm going to start all the way here to Aleph with H. Then I am going to add this symbol instead of the A, and then I'm going to skip and concatenate the rest of the word. That is what my program is doing. And this is going to be done for every time that it finds A until he reaches the final position. So let's try to understand. He starts in 0, he doesn't find the A, he continues to the next letter L, then he continues with E, then with P, then with H, O, and then when he finds the A, then he breaks the word and changes the A for an at, and then concatenates the word. So let's see if this works. Okay, so I'm gonna just uncomment example number 4, and we'll see if this actually works. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't show anything because at the end, after this if, first of all, I am creating an infinite loop. Remember that I need to change the variable position in the while if I wanted to go out in some time. So after this happens, every time that it finishes this, I need to increase position, okay? Because position, otherwise it's gonna stay in 0 all the time. So I need to make it increase, and after I complete the while, after the while, okay, when it finishes, I am going to print the word, okay? So I am going to print the word and see if it actually changed. Let's see if this runs. Okay, as you can see, he changed the A of elephants, okay? Let's try it with another word. It's alphabet or alphabetical. Let's see if all the A's that are here are changed for the symbol that I wanted. Okay? See? So he goes to position 0 and then he makes the change. He goes all the way to position 5 or 6 and then makes a change and continues doing it with the while loop. Okay? Now, our last example is going to be to put a string backwards. Okay, I'm going to grab a string, any string. So I'm going to write down a string here, create a string, string back, and then I'm going to say a word like condition. Okay? Very good. Now my program has to put or change back for NOITIDNOC. So he's going to change the order of my string. In this case, I'm going to use a for loop. And I use a for loop because I can also use a while loop though, but a for loop gives me the control right at the beginning with the parameters. I'm going to say from int a equals, and this is going to be a little bit different because I want to go from the end to the front. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go to back dot length. Okay, so if I go from back dot length, okay, I'm going to start in this position, okay? So it would be position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, it would go from position 8. We'll see what happens if I don't modify this a little. So I'm going to go from back dot length to a greater than 0 or equal than 0, okay? And then a is going to decrease every time. Okay? So let's say I have the for stated this way. Okay? It's going to start at position 8 and then it's going to go all the way to 0. Okay? So what do we need to do? We need to make back concatenate every time. Okay? So the best way to solve this problem is to create another string, a temp string, where I'm going to start adding every single character that I get from the last to the first. Okay? So string front, okay? And then I'm going to make it empty. And let's see what front has to do. So front is going to be equal to front plus back dot character at a, and a is the current position. Okay. Now I'm going to try to run this, and you're going to notice that we are going to get an error. It's called a runtime error. Okay, and you might know why, but the most important thing is that you notice what are the positions, and remember that this have certain positions. Okay, even though the length is 8, the position, the last position is going to be 7. So when we go and look for a character in position 8, he's not going to find anything. So if we run this, okay, if we run example 5, okay, we get string index out of range. Okay, and this is string index out of bounds. You immediately determine that he was making or trying to make reference, the program was trying to make reference to a position that does not exist. Okay, so a very easy way to correct this is typing the length minus 1. Okay, so it starts in position 7 and it goes all the way to 0. Okay, greater or equal than 0. Okay, let's see if we can run this and not get any errors. Well, we don't have any errors, so it looks like he's developing the for loop consistently. What I want to do is that I want to check the results. So I'm going to print the word front and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to run the application, and here I have the word backwards. Okay, so this is very simple. I'm just grabbing this word and then starting with the last position all the way to 0 and putting it in a new string, okay, a temp string. So this helps a lot. So you, as you can notice, you can use for loops and while loops differently, but there are many ways, okay? If you want complete control from the very beginning of your loop, you can use a for loop. If you want infinite loops and then just break at a certain point, you are going to use a while loop. If there is a certain condition that wants you to break out of a loop, you can make a while loop or a for loop, okay? So I hope this helps. These 5 examples that contain while loops and for loops and conditional statements for you to continue learning about these structures. In regards to the week 9 activities, please take a look at the Magpie Labs, Magpie 3 and 4. I will also be posting a video on how to develop these magpies. Another thing is the problem set. This week I added some other exercises, for loops and while loops and conditional statements, okay? Those are very important also. So good luck, and I hope you really understood this tutorial.